Welcome to Intro to Motion Graphics 2021. In this series, you'll learn everything you need to know to get started in the world of motion design. Let's do it.
TipTut.
Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and welcome back to Intro to Motion Graphics 2021. So far we have created the intro in 2 words or whatever words is that you're using during this, and we've explored animating paths, positional scale, rotation, keyframes, all the basic stuff that you need to get started with motion graphics. In this episode we're going to do something a little bit more complicated, but not too much, so don't panic. We'll be starting off with this section here where the shapes pop into view. The word motion appears and fades away, all very simple. And then we're going to start exploring masks and layer effects in this tutorial here, where the word motion pops up and then there's this red bar in the background. So nothing too scary, but it will be exploring effects and masks and things like that. So starting to get into the nitty gritty of what After Effects is all really about for motion graphics. So back in our main composition, we're going to turn on our reference layer, and we're just going to start nice and simply by grabbing the text tool and creating the word motion. Oops, excuse me. Let's position it in place because the anchor point's on the bottom right there, and turn caps lock off so we can see what we're doing. And we'll just position that word motion where we need it and press Ctrl-Alt-Home to place that anchor point in the middle. And with the shape tool selected and with no layers selected down here, that's the important part, we're going to, I'll just eyedropper this yellow to save time. We'll just drag out a rectangle that is roughly the same size. Boom, pretty good. Let's turn off our reference layer again, and we'll just rename this layer a rectangle. And we'll press Ctrl, open square bracket to push it below our text layer. Then selecting both of these, we'll just right click and choose pre-compose like we did before, and we'll just call this one motion. Then double click to go inside, and we've got our motion text layer, which I'll just make white so we can see it, and our rectangle in the background. Using these, we can sort of use them as the base work for the rest of our animation for this section. So step 1 is to do what we did previously before, which is to take our text layer here and using my color palette, which again, I've just got off screen here in Intro to Motion Graphics. I'm just going to change each one of these letters into their own color. And you can do this by just selecting the text tool, highlighting a single layer and choosing that color on that, highlighting a single character and choosing that color on the character. I'm just going to copy the blue again. Like I said before, you can use libraries for this, but I've had trouble with libraries. It doesn't always select the right thing. So I've just got my color palette website open that I showed you in the first episode. For now, I'm just going to hide this background rectangle layer because it's not what we need at the moment. So the first thing we had with these shapes popping up one by one before the word motion just faded in and out. This is actually a really deceptively simple thing to do. I'm going to sample with my shape tool selected, the blue on this M, and we're just going to create a shape that is closest to the overall shape of the letter. In this case, just a rectangle. The O, even simpler, is just going to be a circle. So we'll go to the ellipse tool, we'll sample the red. I'm going to go to the center of the shape and holding Control and Shift, we can draw a circle that grows from the center. And we'll just line that up. The T again is going to be a rectangle, nice and simple. And between each shape here, I am deselecting the previous layer so that it is drawing each shape on its own layer. So you can see here, deselect. So we could rename these M, O, T. I'm just going to duplicate this shape for the I with Control D, and then my selection tool, just hit OK there. Scale this down by unlinking the constrained proportions so I can just scale the width. Just place that over the I. May as well duplicate the O as well. Place that over the other O. Choose blue. And for the N, we can go ahead and duplicate the M, rename it N. and pop it over here. One thing that might be nice is if we were to split this rectangle to make it more obvious that it's supposed to be an N. And to do that, we're going to work with a mask. So I'm going to select my N layer. I'm going to select my pen tool and make sure that I'm selected on the Tool Creates Mask option up here at the top of the toolbar. And we're just going to go slightly below our corner point here. Holding Shift, we can create a perfect diagonal line. Let's draw a triangle over that portion of the shape and it will create a mask for that portion of the shape, which we can then select the whole layer, duplicate it, press R to bring up our rotation and rotate that 180 degrees to bring the shape up to the other corner. And we can then tweak its position like so. That in mind, let's hide the text layer underneath so we can see what we end up with. That's a little bit close. So I think I'm going to increase the gap between those two layers here. And then pressing S, I'm just going to scale those down so that it's a little bit more tweaked. I'm then going to just adjust the position between these until they're equal. And selecting all of them, we'll just press U to collapse all the layers. Now let's go forward, say 3 frames for each. 1, 2, 3. And then press Ctrl-Shift-D to split all of those layers and delete the remaining. So they only exist for 3 frames each. Same thing as we did in the previous lesson. We can then select all these layers, do a right click, and go to Keyframe Assistant Sequence Layers. Sorry, I'm having trouble speaking this morning. Press Enter on that and that'll sequence all of these. Boop, 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 boop. Now we get our nice popping. These two, however, we want them to appear at the same time. So I'm just going to drag those 2 N shapes over the top of each other. Perfect. I am going to shift this over 3 frames. 1, 2, 3, just so that we've got 3 frames at the start and it all appears at the same sequence. The next step is to grab our motion, the word motion, very simple here. And I'm moving quite quickly because this is such a simple thing that we've explored in previous tutorials. Keyframe the opacity with the shortcut T. Do it again 10 frames later. That was Ctrl-Shift-Right. Again, let's then reduce the first and last keyframes to 0. Just like it's loading the motion. Perfect. Let's again Ctrl-Shift-D to split this layer. And for the sake of our sequencing in our heads, we can just split that above it. And we'll take the rectangle and Control or close square bracket to push that up, and just open square bracket to push the start of the layer over to where our playhead is. Now, with that in mind, let's turn on the rectangle layer and let's take a look at what our previous animation did. The shape kind of pushed itself upwards or scaled itself upwards, and the word motion popped from its original position down from the top, but masked out by the rectangle. That's fairly simple to do. The first thing is to take your anchor point of your rectangle and move it down to the bottom of the shape. So we use our pan behind tool and we'll just click and drag that until it's aligned with the bottom of the rectangle. And we can take the scale property here with S, keyframe that. Let's say 30 frames, keyframe it again. We want it to end up in this position, so we'll go back to the first keyframe and just shift that down. Oh, excuse me, that was position, not scale. We're not doing position yet. We're doing scale first. So we'll unlink that and reduce the height down to 0. We'll then Shift P the position and keyframe that. And go back to the first keyframe and just push it down a little bit too. That just gives us a nice little extra bit of motion as it shifts its way upwards. Although linear keyframes we know are rubbish, so we'll hit F9 on that, go to our graph editor and just drag these final points here so we get a nice eased speed. There we go, much nicer. If we take our motion layer, which we can see at the moment is on top, but currently all yellow. Is that correct? No, sorry, currently at opacity 0. We'd want this to be opacity 100, so we can just delete all those keyframes. But we only want this shape to appear where the yellow rectangle appears if we look at our original here, like so. Additionally, it's also allowing or is showing through the background color. So we want to make sure we can do that as well. Let's go back to our motion composition here. And I'm just going to make it white now just to make things a bit easier. And with the rectangle layer selected, we can go to toggle switches / modes. And there will be an icon on one of these screens under the track matte column. And we can choose alpha matte motion 2, but we want the inverted one. What this means is this layer will only appear where the motion layer isn't, if that makes sense. So alpha matte would make the motion layer only visible when it's in the confines of the rectangle layer. But the invert is the opposite. This layer disappears when it is in the confines of the rectangle layer and makes it kind of a cutout, which is exactly what we want. Let's go to our finish position, keyframe the position of the motion layer, back to the start position, and just shift it up so that it slides in like so. Again, F9 on those. Drag this one over. Boom. Nice. Of course, this is only very simple motion at the moment. You could add as much or as little nuance to this as you'd like. But we've learned about masking using track mats. We've learned about sequencing and splitting layers. And now we're going to learn about layer effects. So the final thing that happens in this example here is this red object that scales up from the center and has this, if we zoom in, kind of a animated rough edge to the shape, for want of a better word. Let's go back to our composition. This is very easy to make. We're just going to grab our rectangle tool, or if you wanted to, you could just duplicate this rectangle, but we'll draw a new one. We'll grab our rectangle tool and we'll just make a rectangle that covers the word motion, and we'll push it below those other two layers. And we'll make the start of it begin where our playhead begins. Let's go to scale keyframes. Let's unlink them again. Go for a full second and we'll scale it up from 0 to 100, the same as we did with the yellow rectangle. But on the second keyframe, instead of 100, we'll just drag it so that it only fills a portion. And because we haven't put any position keyframes, we can reposition this however we like to fill the exact center of that motion text. Now, at the moment, this scale looks fine. Let's add some easing to the keyframes, exactly the same as it did before. Should be second nature by now. Scales up, perfect. But it doesn't look nice because we haven't added the roughen edges to it like we did in the example. So going up to our effects and presets panel, give it a second for all the effects to load. There we go. And we are going to type in roughen edges. When you have that roughen edges in your palette, just drag that down to your layer. And you probably won't notice much at first because it's very subtle, but you can see that some of these edges have started to bend and warp out of shape. If you press Ctrl-Shift-H, it will hide all of your guides and shape layer edges, which allows you to see things like this a bit easier. And Ctrl-Shift-H again will bring that back. I'm going to increase the border of my shape a whole bunch. Also increase the edge sharpness to make those edges sharper. And the fractal influence needs to remain at 1. The scale, however, we want to crunch all the way down to its lowest factor, which gives us this kind of animated noise effect, which is nice. And the stretch will leave it by itself. Complexity, however, we will also turn up. Now, it's important you do this on your final keyframe or at any point past it. But once you've cranked everything like that up to the top, you play with the border in order to see how much of the edge you really want that to affect. Look at it at roughly 100% to get the perfect amount. I'm going to say about 50 works well here. These edges are a little bit crunchy for my taste though. So you can filter through some of these like roughen color to see which ones you prefer the look of. Perhaps rusty. Rusty looks quite nice, but it does extend quite far. I think I'll stick with roughen, the first one, and just increase that crunch. And you'll also notice that this isn't animated. Okay, it stays at that style of roughen once the shape finishes moving. And we're just going to use a very simple expression to animate this. You'll notice if we twist this evolution dial, it animates. And we could just go to the start of our layer, place a keyframe, go to the end of our layer, place another keyframe, and say like 10 times. Yeah. But what if we come to extend this later on? Yes, that works, and it does crinkle, but that's 2 keyframes that we again have to worry about if and when we come to modify this composition. So instead, I'm going to Alt click, so hold Alt and click this evolution keyframe, which opens up the expression window for that specific thing. Very simple. Time, and then asterisk, which is the calculator command for times, as in, 4 times 5 or whatever. Time times, let's put 50 in there, see what happens. And then a semicolon to close that line of code. All this means is, over time, at a rate of 50, animate this element. Now, it is animating, but it's very slow, if you can see. So we don't want 50. Let's try something drastic like 500. Much better. Now, this will animate forever and ever until we choose to stop it with another expression. Okay? So, boop, 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 pops up like that. Let's take a look at our original file. I think that is the last thing that shape does. Yes, indeed. So let's pop back to our main composition. We have our shape here. However, we want it to be below this 2 layer because the 2 layer has a multiply on it. And if we check our reference, it's slightly off position wise. So we can fix that by just tweaking until we're happy. That looks better to me. Let's hide our reference and choose its starting point. So do we want it to start straight away? Let's see what that looks like. That looks pretty good to me, actually, at that timing. So I think that looks pretty good. All right. So in this episode, we learned a little bit about track masking. We learned a little bit about effects layers and things like that. And we learned about, well, we continue to learn about pre-composition, which is what's going to be very important in our next lesson, because in the next lesson, we'll be exploring this graphics section here, where all of these layers come in individually, rotate into place, find their position. But you'll notice that each of them has the same interior pre-comp, i.e. different parts of the same pre-composition. So this is where we basically turn everything that we've learned in these previous lessons and place it into this final section. For now, though, that's plenty to be getting on with. So I hope you join me for the next lesson in this series. I hope you've been enjoying it so far. If you have, please consider subscribing, ringing the bell, etc. And I'll see you next time for another episode of TipTut. Massive thank yous to my level 2 and above members: WN62, Motion Explainer, Maybe Sharma, Ian Costello, Lone Wolf 16, Katmar, Rob V, Jason Carroddy, MP, Mizuev, Volafers, Melem, Hoover, 2 Steps to Chill, Josh Colon, Ursula Famanska, The Saucier, Lolly Lulolo X, Andrew Hammond, Jana Carey, JK Digital Creations, Jarbs Animations, Paul Jarman, Sergio Delegado, Ralika M, and Narain Abdillah. Thank you so much, you lovely, lovely people. You're all beautiful. Click the join button below for more exclusive perks to get shout outs at the end of each video like this one. Ooh.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.